Thank you, Raji, for those very kind remarks. I think you did offer me an option of what I should be in my capacity to associate with this institution. And I didn't have two opinions on that, not because I am very good in making judgments, but more so because I knew what you like me to be with this institution. And so I said the obvious. You know, Raji and myself, we have been associated for a very long time. In many ways, he said about the Rajasthan Education Commission and many other bodies. And we often meet for something or other. Extremely interesting discussions take place. And he is so much, in fact, you were told that I have prevented him from saying more than what he just now said about myself. But I should say that I have no such limits in talking about Rajiv himself. And he is one of those modern visionaries in the area which the country, one can say, really made a turnaround. And not only in the context of science and technology, but also in the context of what I may say, the economics. 30 or 40 years back, that everywhere the youngsters got an opportunity to take advantage of the impending computer revolution and transform India into a kind of a nerve center in the area of information technology. I should say, if you ask me to name one individual who influenced that development, I should say without hesitation, it's Raji. Why I'm telling about his name is because I think such people who has this vision are born once in a while in this country. The value of those people can be really appreciated only if you have been also associated with somebody like him. And when he asked that I should give the first title of this foundation lecture, I thought I should talk about something which is close to my heart. It became close to my heart because I was nobody, somebody picked me up one day and he called me to his room and he said that there is something very exciting that's going to happen in this country. And I personally feel you should play a role in that. A lot of youngsters in India will have an opportunity to play a role in this area. That was the space program. He never knew what I am. I am just one of those students just passed out with a lot of aspirations for the future, but nothing more than that. And I don't think I had that kind of a credential to immediately make him struck with my personality or my ability to communicate to him and to show my own confidence of what or even understanding of what he was trying to say. But then that is what revered me. And that was none other than India's space pioneer, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. Vikram Sarabhai, why such people like Rajiv I mentioned about is, people like them, they always think something which is out of box. Vikram Sarabhai thought about a program for this country around the time when the first Sputnik went up in space, 1957, October 4th. And he thought, at that time, of course, the Sputnik went up in space because this was competition coming out of the Cold War between the United States and the then Soviet Union. And it caught his imagination. And how did it catch his imagination? India is not a very developed country, a lot of problems, issues of education, issues of illiteracy, issues of health, issues of knowing the natural resources, timely, precise and accurate information about natural resources, ability to reach communication to the far-flung regions of the country. They were all problems, and there are no shortcut solutions for these kind of a thing. And what Dr. Vikram Sarabhai thought is that here is a new tool, the vantage point of space, which the human beings have now accessed. What can this vantage point of space can do to the humankind, and for a country like India with its own developmental problems? That triggered him into thinking that there is a justification for this country to undertake a space program, much more than the justification what the United States and the Soviet Union had. And why? What was their justification? They were really racing in the Cold War. Each one wanted a technological superiority over other. In the case of a vantage point of space being accessed, these satellites which you put into the space and you put a camera in it, you can start surveillancing other parts of the world. The orbit in which the satellites move are well above the legal structure in which you are forbidden to see your opponent or the country adversaries. And therefore there is a freedom of snooping in. And therefore this provides a very unique capability, a very, very strong way to deal with your adversary. And that was in the mind of both these countries when they started the space race. But Dr. Sarabhai had nothing of that kind in mind. He thought he's not ever going to race with the Americans as well as the Soviets in this area. But here are a number of problems that confront this country, and he thought that this is a very unique opportunity to exploit this vantage point of space for the country's national development and addressing many of its urgent problems. I am saying this to all of you is because when you talk of a visionary, you really talk of somebody who knows the issues, who knows the problems of the society, but most importantly, you try to bring solutions which are out of box. And it is not necessary that the solution got developed because somebody in the neighborhood developed a technology or something. It may happen anywhere in the world. But that technology to translate, to map, and then make it relevant for this country, and that too to make it relevant to this country in the context of critical issues on which it can play a decisive role, I think that not every mind can think about. When Baba thought about the three-phase nuclear program, or Dr. Vikram Sarabhai thought about the space program, or I should say without hesitation, Rajya thought about a communications revolution through information technology and computers, starting 30 years of training and then transcending into an educational program, and now he's aiming for research. I think these are areas and these are strategies which doesn't come to individuals very often, and that is what distinguishes them from the rest of the community, and that is precisely what Sarabhai was. I chose this topic of space also because of the fact it can in a way circumscribe several elements of interest that you all have, whether it is in communications, whether it is in information technology, whether it is in computers, whether it is in management, and so there are a number of areas. So if you want to, one can talk about these subjects separately, give you an update on this, but that becomes a part of a textbook that is already available to you, and you've got very eminent professors who will teach you. But this opportunity I thought of talking about space will be an opportunity for me to also talk about the various elements or the dimensions of the space program and the way in which the different pioneers of the space program thought about how to move it forward, and how to not only make it a very exciting area which can be inspiring for the new generation, but more importantly, how do we make use of this in the context of the country's needs. So here was a vision of a founder, that is Dr. Sarabhai. Then the more equally important is the fact that when you try to go with sometimes these crazy ideas, and I want to send up a satellite in space, the political system has to support you. So one is the credibility of the person, the visionary, in trying to sell an idea to a political system, and there it was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Madam Indira Gandhi. Both of them supported to the hilt this idea of Dr. Sarabhai, that we should go. And you should know the time at which this decision was made by Pandit Nehru. There was no benchmark about the space capability to do development for a particular country. There was no idea of how much of money ultimately we will be committing in a long-term perspective of a space program. One doesn't know. But people knew that it's not going to be insignificant. The third element, there is a risk element. So, flying a rocket or flying a satellite in space is not like driving a motor car on the ground. It has got much higher levels of complexities. So he knew that there is a risk element, there is an economic aspect which is much more than what one can think of, and there is no benchmark to say that it's going to be very useful for the development. In spite of all these, the political system supported this program. So that also shows how this country is able to take a view which is much farther than conventional. You have also many countries in the region. I don't think that it occurred to them that we should move in that particular direction. So there was a political support. So far as I am concerned, it's technologically challenging, scientifically inspiring, organizationally innovative. So all of which you might be interested to know. Institutional mechanisms, which are institutional mechanisms, successive leaderships. And another important thing in any kind of a program in this country, you start a program, it's going to be a major relay race spanning over 40 years to 50 years. How do you deal with that kind of a program? So you need leaderships which are successively they recognize this kind of a responsibility. The planning itself, because this is an area again where the country does not have any input from outside systems, because these are strategic areas. So you need to have a planning which recognizes that you're not going to get much, and we will see some of the stories to convince you what kind of strategies that ISRO had to adopt to overcome many of the problems, the hurdles that we had in running this program. It had a very unique culture, and again, I'll talk about a little bit of that later. And ultimately, the stronger linkages when you build a system, your first thing is to make sure that there is a large amount of stakeholders. When you try to create a university, you do it with the full recognition that there is a set of people, the youngsters, who are looking for an education here within a certain area. So there is this kind of strong user linkages, and if you don't do that, then you internalize the program, and when you internalize the program, it ultimately loses the relevance, sometimes very fast and sometimes over a little period. And of course, in space case, I should also say there is this question of self-reliance. As I told you, that we had the problems which are related to the non-availability of technologies from outside. And this is the reason, of course. So you will see that in the global perspective, the space started with the strategic military objectives. Some scientific objectives were plugged onto that, but basically it was military objectives. India was one of it that started with objectives which are socio-economic in terms of this. So here is the pioneer, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. When we started this, of course, he knew that we have to slowly build up this area. It cannot be just built in a day. You have to get the right people. You have to conceptualize the right type of steps to take, whether it's an experiment, whether it is a proof of concept, evaluation. You need to have the right type of technology base. And there is a whole host of political support, as I said, and ultimately to work with a number of stakeholders who will try to be with you in terms of developing this. So this is all that was there. So what he did is he found a very easy way. He found that there is a number of scientists in the country who are interested in the geophysical phenomena. And one of the very interesting resources that our country has is the geomagnetic field which passes over the southernmost tip of the country. And it triggers off a number of phenomena in the atmosphere. So this triggering of a number of phenomena, what you call as the plasma phenomena, one could do with in situ measurements if you fly some rockets. And there were a number of scientists who were very interested to, I should say particularly the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which looked into this program. They made a nice 4-page report saying that this program makes India to go into a different regime of space exploration. But going to the moon is a very limited objective. ISRO has to be more ambitious and try to go to other areas. So this is coming from a parliamentary committee, really was something which clinched the issue. And of course the Prime Minister on August 15 in 2003 made the declaration that India's first mission will go to the moon. And what is interesting about that declaration from the Prime Minister, I am telling this to tell you some of these complex decisions have to go through a process. Sometimes it takes 3 to 4 years. And when you make these complex decisions, you have to get the support of the political system, as I said. And the political system looks at it, they really like to see what they will get out of it. So when this was all told to the then Prime Minister, He was absolutely thrilled to the fact that the country is supporting this program. That's all he wanted to know. And then he said, you send me a note, and they said, Somayana will be the name of this mission. And we sent a note to him. And then he announced it on August 15 to say it will be Chandrayaan-1. So next day when I met the Prime Minister, I asked him, how is it that you changed the name, so Somayana became Chandrayaan, and you also added 1. You know, I consulted some of the other Sanskrit scholars who've told me that Chandrayaan probably is a better word than Somayaan. But important thing is that I added 1. Because how do you have a planetary exploration program with only 1 mission of a Chandrayaan? So I want it to be a series. So this is a political decision that they added 1 to show that it's going to be a series. So this is I am telling this because you need to establish a credibility with the political system in this country if you want to really succeed in pushing programs. And when you talk of creating the necessary credibility, you need to go with interesting things with a lot of support which you have to show is important so that they take this decision. And once you do that, I think the total system is with you in undertaking this kind of mission. And of course, the Chandrayaan was undertaken, as I told you, not only because of the political support. It provided a unique method of improving the technology of this country in this area. It provided a unique opportunity to look at the moon, its many unanswered questions to be addressed. Then there was this inspirational aspect for the youngsters, and then it provided an opportunity for international collaboration and cooperation. So these were the multiple part of it, and this is just to give you a feel of the way in which this mission took place. Only thing I want to tell you is the tricky part of trying to take it out of the Earth's gravity, put it into the gravity field of another planet, and do this entire maneuver. This is all Indian strategy, computations, and various kinds of maneuvers that were conducted. These are some of the most tricky maneuvers. Why I'm calling it tricky maneuvers is that there were about 50 or 60 missions to the moon. Most of the missions, whether it is United States or Soviet Union, the first of the missions, either it went and crashed on the moon or escaped the gravity of the moon. It was never possible to insert it into an orbit around the moon because of the complexity of the computation that you need to do in the case of a trajectory analysis. So that's where we took a lot of care, and I should say that the very first mission that we could insert the Chandrayaan right into the orbit that is expected for the moon spoke volumes of our youngsters' ability to do these intricate calculations, which was the basis for this success of the mission. Well, ISRO is managed in a certain way in this country. You might be interested to know that it is, I don't want to give you the details of what it is all about, but the important thing is as early as 1972, the importance of a certain way of managing the program, scientific program in the country was important. Here, what we want to say is that one nice statement that was made when the order was issued of forming a space commission, free from all non-essential restrictions or needlessly elastic loads. We talk so much about the bureaucracy and all that kind of a thing, because it doesn't exist in your system that Rajya has created, but in many other places this is very much true. And if you want to do a program which needs money, which needs risky decisions, I think this kind of things were called for, and the planners and the decision makers realized this early in the program to make sure that we have the necessary the flexibility to do this. And of course, another component of ISRO was to make sure that we also market our capability to many other many other parties in the world. One of the only thing I want to tell you about creating a business model for ISRO is the fact that you would like to build and sell a satellite to somebody. When you want to build a satellite and sell a satellite to somebody, you have to make sure that that particular satellite conforms to the specification with the user puts it down. It could be a famous American operator or an international operator like Intelsat. And these are normally the state-of-art specification. And when you have to successfully build a satellite and launch it and provide the service for them, it really is a fantastic benchmark for you to show that you have reached a level which is acceptable to the country. It is not just accepting this only within the country, but also equally importantly, that it is accepted as a world standard. This is what we often showed in trying to sell some of these high technology systems, whether it is a satellite, whether it is providing a launch vehicle support, or many of the other elements of services that we could provide. This I will just scan. Now let us just look at some of the important aspects of what are these management practices that we have followed. Because in a sense, what I mentioned as a culture of ISRO this is the one. One of the important things is when you want to build a system as complex as a space mission, there is, and I also said that there are several areas of engineering and technological elements. We talk of interaction, communication, and this is one of the documentation. This is one of the one of the most important element of ensuring that the program puts in the right track and we get the right type of output at different points in a programmatic phase. Other part of it is that independently you have to make sure that whatever you create as a system, it will pass through an independent assessment, what you call as a review system. This is very rigorously followed in ISRO in trying to make sure that it is not our internal decision that we have done it right, but somebody from outside comes and tells that you have done it right. So, and therefore there are reviews, you hear their views, you hear their criticisms, and these criticisms become major inputs in making the necessary corrections if they are found to be important. The third, of course, is the final product. And I said that we are not building systems for internal use in ISRO. You do it for Doordarshan, you do it for All India Radio, you do it for the Agriculture Ministry, and so on and so forth. So the performance of the system is ultimately evaluated by a user community which is much wider and across many disciplines in the country, and they are the ones who ultimately tell you whether they are satisfied with the product or not. And this is where the real challenge comes, because they not only come and review this and they make sure that your systems are as per what is needed, but it also produces tremendous discipline in you to ensure that these systems do not deviate just because you want to cut down in spare time, you want to cut down certain type of engineering specifications and so on. So there is an accountability that comes out of this, there is a level of transparency that comes out of this. Then mission is executed in a project mode. In most of these kind, we try to make sure that we do these missions in a project mode, because you want to keep a strict control on technical issues, the technical configuration, the cost aspects of it, and schedule elements. In fact, the early space program and the management of the early space program is the one that gave you an idea of a configuration control. The configuration control is an integrated control of the product, the cost, the time, and so on and so forth. And any perturbation in one of the system, what it happens needs to be constantly analyzed. So there are modules, there are kind of simulation modules on which we run through this kind of a thing, and also it works in the context of ensuring that every point we have a strict control on the final configuration that we will realize within the time frame that one is talking about. And then, of course, the other part of it is the learning from failures. And this is one of the things that ISRO has taught right from the beginning. I will give you a couple of examples of this, so I won't dwell on it here. Public outreach, mechanism for encouraging ideas. These are all, of course, the hallmarks of good organization. A couple of things I would like to say is learning the hard way. How do you... ISRO, it is not that we had successes all through. We had problems several times, in several contexts, whether it is in satellite or in launch vehicles. I'll give you one example. One of the examples is we had a satellite which we wanted to be a precursor for our remote sensing satellite. The precursor satellite, what we call as Bhaskara, it had a camera system which used a type of a television tube. And it had also a very simple control system spinning it and so on. And it could take pictures from the space of a ground feature, which is about 1 kilometer, very coarse, good enough to look at some of the applications, but necessarily good enough in the context of what you ultimately want to do, but it nevertheless give an opportunity to wet your hands on an end-to-end basis, putting a camera into a satellite, operating the satellite, taking the pictures, analyzing the picture, work with the user, look at the evaluation that imagery, and then give a feedback. So this entire loop we could close to and evaluate it on an experimental basis by this. We had in this particular satellite, as I said, a Vidicon tube. The Vidicon tube had a high voltage system. And you know, one of the problems of a high voltage system in space or in vacuum is whenever there are some residual gases left, these high voltages can trigger what you may call as electrical discharges, like lightning discharges, or you see it in the lamppost on a wet day when you can see those discharges. So this kind of thing it can trigger. And when you have these kind of discharges, you have the problem of disturbance, electromagnetic disturbances. So this is the kind, so we took all precautions to make sure that this is avoided by doing an extensive test in the space simulation chamber and ensuring that it doesn't occur in space. But after launching it, we found that after 7th or 8th day when we switched on, there was a huge electromagnetic disturbance in the spacecraft, which immediately we could diagnose as a possible electromagnetic interference coming out of an electrical discharge. We put the whole, and there was a standby system, we put it into the vacuum chamber. We started looking at the performance over a long period of time. We also simultaneously started looking at the theory of electrical discharges. We looked at simulating some of the discharge characteristics. You know, you have the chrome dark space and many things you study in a vacuum. How does the voltage break down? So we started studying all that kind of a thing. Somebody did actual calculations and so on. So there was simulation, there was calculation, there was actually putting the payload in the multiplicity of things we mounted. And then we arrived at the problem, but there was specifically an area where it was giving away. The reason why I said is that initially we reported this to the higher management. At that time it was Satish Dhawan. And Satish Dhawan said that I'm not very sure that we are going to retrieve this camera and we are going to get the pictures from space. And this was our first effort, you should know. And some of our engineers bet with him and said, no, we will try to retrieve this camera. So he said, okay, try it. And he said that I will bet one month of my salary to you if you succeed. Otherwise, you have to give 1 month of your salary. You see the informality of the top man with many of us. I just want to tell, because this is the kind of a culture that makes you confident in spite of this kind of problems. We went 6 months later, we knew that the air inside would have, the occluded gas would have already left. And then it was a hard vacuum. So when you switch it on, the camera worked. Lo and behold, there was a beautiful picture taken from space, the first picture of an Indian satellite taken from space. We were simply thrilled, and then we rushed to Satish Dhawan and showed him the first picture. And he said, sir, here is a picture. You said we will not be able to retrieve this from space. And here is a picture which tells that our conjecture was right. And he said, okay, so what are we going to do? So no, we expect your 1 month salary to us. So he took out 5 rupees and gave it to that engineer. We were all surprised that he is giving for 5 rupees for that particular bet. Then so one of us asked, sir, I thought you were giving us 1 month's salary and you got 5 rupees. Look, my dear friend, I am working as chairman of ISRO and I am also the director of the Indian Institute of Science. I take my full salary from the Indian Institute of Science, and from ISRO I take only 1 rupee token. So I have given ISRO salary to you. I am not telling this in the lighter vein. I'm just trying to tell you the kind of feeling they have about the youngsters and the type of confidence, but how do they inspire them and make sure that we were continuously on the track? In fact, by challenging us in this kind of a thing, we now retrieved this camera system. Another kind of a thing is we also had a satellite which went into a suborbital orbit. We had to raise it to a final level. There was that day Indra Kumar Gurjal, who was the then Prime Minister. He watched the thing. He was extremely happy. In fact, as chairman, I got a bear hug from him, very interestingly. But later on, by the time I came out of the control room, they said, sir, it has gone to 300 kilometers and not at 800 kilometers. I immediately went and told him. And he said, no, don't worry, I'm sure you will get it out. And we did extensive calculations of how to get it up with the residual fuel that is left in the satellite. And believe it or not, we not only raised the orbit from the space, and we also made it work for the next 5 years. Its lifetime was 3 years. So this is another kind of a challenge. This was an extraordinary situation. And then we learned that many vehicle developments across the world, whether it is in the United States or Soviet Union or Europe, had earlier had this problem of a separation dynamic. Nobody told us that there would be a separation dynamic problem. But we did it, we analyzed it, we found a solution to this. The most important thing is having already got that separation dynamic, we introduced it into all the future vehicles. Like this is what is called as a time delay methods and so on. I don't want to go into the technological details of it. But the interesting part of it is there was a tremendous amount of analysis that was needed, simulations that were needed, a national committee has to be brought in, experts even from abroad were consulted. But ultimately we had a success in the launch vehicle program because we paid.
If we had not failed in this and if there was a marginality in our decision, maybe we had to pay a heavier price in the later years. We had an early failure, we took advantage of the failure, we used it as a stepping stone for success, and we have the fulfillment. So, these failures, what I want to say is they are always a stepping stone for success, provided you know how to use those failure information in correcting the system. I'll say a couple of other things, more to show a science and technology department nobody asks what is the cost benefit that you get. They will ask it in many other contexts. We decided at some stage that's good to have an analysis of the cost benefit of the space. And there are several things interestingly we found. And all I want to say most importantly is not that materials were cheaper, we got it from outside. We found our engineering costs were low. The per hour pay that we pay to the engineers is far below what the per hour engineer costs abroad. And in the whole process we found that we can build a satellite at 20 to 30% cheaper cost than a similar satellite abroad. And similarly for launch vehicle and for many other kind of applications. Here again what I want to say is, of course things are changing in this country. The demand, the salary for it is going up, and the corresponding implications with respect to the cost of products and services could be there. But as of now, space systems and high technology hardware today, still India can be a source, not only because there is a good reliability and other kind of management culture, but equally importantly, it can be a very cost-effective solution for people not only within the country or from abroad. There is another dimension which is related to policy. I will not go into the details of it. When you try to put a spacecraft, there are many things that we need to really look at it. We need to have a geostationary orbit, spectrum allocation policies, satellite communication policies with respect to which is the footprint of the satellite, broadcasting policies. So there are a number of things that the space program has triggered in this country and elsewhere. I've just summarized it. So to me, we should be not only running the space program, we should take cognizance of the type of implications they have in the international arena. And we have to be a partner, we should be not only trying to conform to some of these. Today, because of the space capability that we have built, we have been also able to influence many of these policies. So all that I want to say here is, the country's ability to influence the policy very much depends on where we reach with respect to the capability that we have built on this. So what is all it measures? You have a number of things that the space really conveys as a message. It is a very unique culture, and some of the culture that I mentioned earlier is very much there. It is of course be nationally and socially relevant. Institutionalized, and that's one of the important things. We always wanted to make sure that we have a large number of people who are stakeholders, who are the ones who really fight for your space program, not ourselves that we want to build a satellite. It is the user community that does it. And then of course you have to promote standards of excellence, policy framework, and ultimately a business culture, which also provides you a very unique way of doing a benchmarking of your product and type of services. So in a sense, why I try to bring in these elements into the fore of my talk is more to see that a culture of an organization which is very much related to, there is a risk in that system, there is a larger investment that is going up now, and there is a relevance which has to be consistently kept, and there are competing technologies. So at one time, communications and we saw VSATs, very small aperture terminals were the only way to reach far front phase. Today you have the wideband networks and optical communication, so we have to really compete with them. So you need to find out innovative ways in which a space system can compete with the ground system, where there can be a complementary capability, and that has to be seen. And then ultimately we have to continuously upgrade our own strategy of running a space program to make it relevant for the country. So these are the kind of challenges in the coming years, and at the same time, the interest on the science-based science, I want to emphasize this, is one of the driving factors for certain aspects of India's space science. And if you really look at the way in which the Chandrayaan has kindled the enthusiasm among the youngsters, it's quite obvious that the space science missions have their own unique role to play in terms of bringing the best of excitement of science to a large number of youngsters who in a sense would be then the scientific temper, interested to get into the science area and also work on challenging technological area becomes an important possibility that this country will have. So in a sense, so if you ask me finally, what is the way we are going on, we will certainly have a consolidation of many social applications. So social applications of space, technological upgradation is another thing. We want to be in the forefront, then ultimately promote science, and lastly, also international collaboration. Between them, we become a system which the country can be proud of in terms of its ability to demonstrate the determination to be right there where everybody is racing to be. Thank you very much.
Would you like to take a few questions?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay, so now's your time. Curiosity starts with question.
Myself, Krishnaswamy from NIIT. It's a question of the national policy. I believe we were one of the responsible person for launching a military satellite with 40 centimeter capability for this.
Just a little louder.
I believe you are one of the responsible person for launching the defense satellite of 40 centimeter capability resolution. But why this was not brought into a commercial segment when the foreign satellites have launched that and many of our national projects are using such a resolution? Is there some policy behind that?
No, there are systems which are funded by various agencies. Then we have to conform to the conditions they lay down. So long as we get our own direct support for these kind of programs, and it is in the civilian domain, we have no problem of providing this kind of information. But of course, the satellite policy, the image policy itself, as you know, has now been brought up to 1 meter. And so the 40 centimeter kind of a resolution would mean that we have to review. It came up to 5 meters at the time when we launched IRS 1C and 1D. It has now come to 1 meter because of the Cartosat. And hopefully in the coming years we'll go to the 40 centimeter and will be available in the civilian domain. So that is also depending on where we are capabilities stand. But there is nothing that prevents us from providing this in the public domain.
Good afternoon, sir. To power the satellites, is there any other method than solar fuel?
Yes.
Do we have included nuclear power in that?
No. Right now we don't include nuclear power because of the fact any nuclear reactor that we put on board, there are specific restrictions simply because of the fact that in case of the satellite leaving the orbit and coming down, the nuclear power reactor should not break up and in the process spread the radioactive material. So there are restrictions on that. But more importantly, so far as the near-Earth orbiting system that we are building, like the Indian remote sensing satellite class or the communication satellite class, you can use solar panels which can go to several thousand, 5 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt class of satellites are built for that. There is only one more thing, there has to be a supplementing system for looking at the eclipse periods. So you have lithium-ion batteries which we use for that. So between lithium-ion batteries and solar photovoltaic system today, the requirements of most of the satellites are met. When it comes to the long-term missions, like the mission that ISRO is now considering, the mission to Mars, for example, where you have a 6 to 8 months transit time, and you go far beyond for the sun, that's what happens today. Probably one has to go also for radioactive power sources. But then use of radioactive power sources in interplanetary medium is less hazardous land in the vicinity of the Earth, but there is a finite possibility of it coming and crashing on the Earth. So we will be developing radioactive power sources for planetary missions, which are forthcoming in the next 4 to 5 years.
So solar panels can chip off due to solar flares. How can you say that the nuclear reactors will break off like this only? We have some security in the vacuum chamber, steel chamber, titanium chamber.
Oh no, you know the re-entry dynamics, if you really look at it, it can break up a whole shuttle, you know that. So the type of re-entry dynamics and the type of forces and stresses that come on that can certainly break up the systems, and if there is a breakup, as it happened in one of the Russian satellites over Canada, it can simply spill the radioactive thing. So whereas the solar panels are concerned, they are designed in such a way that they will be able to encounter 4 or 5 major solar flares, and in those flares there will be a high irradiation. The irradiation by itself will reduce the efficiency of the system. That is reckoned with in doing the power balance calculation, so that the satellite performance does not suffer.
Good afternoon, sir. Sometime back, China destroyed its satellite by a laser beam to show its might. So, do we have reached that stage if a satellite is hijacked?
Hijacking the satellite is not the issue. And your issue is probably destroying the satellite. Well, the destroying the satellite means essentially you have got several means. One is, of course, you can have a laser beam with which you can do. The second is what is called the kinetic killing, where you take a small satellite and go near to a working satellite and virtually bang on it so that it will incapacitate the satellite's functioning. This is another kind of a thing. And third thing, of course, is to blind certain critical elements of the satellite so that either temporarily or permanently the satellite can be incapacitated. If you ask me we have the necessary ability to do this, but whether we are doing it in the defense domain, we will not be able to comment, but certainly we have the ability to do this.
So, a similar question, speaking of this kinetic killing. So there was an interesting news article the other day about the significant amount of space debris and how that will potentially be a hindrance to future launches. So in that connection, could you give us a sense of relative percentage of space debris, who's responsible for how much of the space debris is ISRO responsible for, and what is our moral position on that down the road, on the space debris?
Actually, much of the, I think if I remember correctly, 40 to 50,000 objects of 4 inches and above are today orbiting the Earth's surface. Much of it has come from the American and the Soviet program. Even between the two, the Soviet program would have contributed more, simply because there was a time in the 60s and 70s and even 80s, they were launching at the rate something like 200 satellites per year. So they were virtually doing it once in 100 satellites, 120 satellites. Once in 3 days they were launching a satellite. And then there is a notorious aspect of some of these last stages of the launch vehicle breaking up, which has also happened both with the Russian and the American vehicles. So much of it has contributed from 50-60% or 70% has come from these, and the rest is only from China, China, Europe and India. So so far as the contribution is concerned. So far as mitigating this is concerned, there are many things that are being taught. One is using the space group to virtually take out all the, improve it out. There is one way of implementing it. The other thing is to have a laser system to burn some of these larger particles. And then the third thing is to allow, the smaller particles have a tendency to come and burn in the atmosphere. The higher ones, you avoid it by introducing those kind of artifacts in the satellite and launch vehicle so that they are less likely to pollute the orbits in which you need to operate the regular satellite. So for example, if you want to talk to communication satellite, It has got a 10-year lifetime. At the end of the 10 years, there will be some amount of propellant will be left in the satellite. You know, a communication satellite per year, if you've got a 24 transponders, is about something like $24 million, 24 to $30 million is per year value of a communication satellite of 24 transponders. So if I take a part of that fuel and take it out, that means that could be something like 2 to 3 months equivalent of fuel. That means I forego a revenue which is about $6 to $7 million. So this is another thing that is coming into picture in the international bodies. So how do we deal with this kind of a thing so that we can still take this? If you use the fuel, you can either kick it up or kick it down from the geosynchronous orbit. And lastly, with respect to the vehicles also, one of the notorious things is the last stage of the launch vehicle like PSLV. They also go into the orbit along with the satellite. So what they try to do there is that they passivate this fast final stage. That means you pacify the solenoidal valve and allow all the fuel to come out. Otherwise what happens is these fuels are normally hyperbolic. So in orbit after a few years suddenly some oxidizer and fuel make contact because of the leakage. And once it makes the contact, there is an explosion. And once there is an explosion, thousands of smaller particles will come in. So that is to be avoided by making sure that you passivate them. Yeah.
In concept launches, there is a method like you have in a laser beam, you propel the satellite or a space body with laser light. So is it possible or is it only like?
Well, if you do a simple...
It again speed up to Mach 5.
Very, very good question. Actually, there are calculations. You know, it is after all a photon collision with an object. And if you got a photon, it's almost speed of light. So speed of light, you have got a photon which will exchange the momentum with an object, like a large shield on which the space laser beam can come and laser beam can come and image. Now, the incremental velocity you can get by this kind of a thing is calculated to be not very large. So today, the laser beam, this is called as the laser beam prompted propulsion. This is now thought about for interstellar flights, where you need so many years, so you just keep hitting the beam, because there are no fuel which is available to keep propelling it and increasing the acceleration. They are also looking at it with respect to planetary missions, whether we can also use it for propelling in the planetary mission.
Like in Pluto, they have sent USF sent a flight that will reach in 28 years.
That's right.
If they had used the laser propulsion, they would have reached in 8 years. So 20 years.
Well, I think this all depends on what is the level of the size of these shields that you need to build. A shield as big as the area of Neemrana is the one that can take you to 8 years, and then if it is a 1/3 object, then it will be something like 28 years. So these are scaling up and scaling down operations, but they are becoming unwieldy in terms of an engineering design. On paper, you can do this calculation. Hello.
When can we see first Indian on moon?
When
can we see first Indian on moon?
On moon, that has to be seen. I don't think that we have set a schedule for it, but to me it looks that it should be part of an international venture, because of our equal status of contributing to the lunar mission. We should be a part of that, and in that case, we can put an Indian also like Rakesh Sharma was a bird here, and we can go to moon.
Sir, are we doing any kind of biological experiments in zero gravity?
We did want to do that. Right now, there is no experiment. We did try to propose all these experiments in rockets, because there is a flight path in which you have nearly a zero gravity condition. We wanted to grow protein structures which can be looked at with the, if you want to grow large protein structures, you have to have it under zero gravity, otherwise these structures have a tendency to break. So there have been proposals to see whether we can do this with respect to growing of large protein structures. So that is one of the things that I am aware of that the Indian scientists wanted to do. Other things on which similar things right now is not there. At least I am not aware of any plans.
One last question. Are there any international norms as to where you can put your satellite, or every country or everybody is free to put up at any place in the space?
No, there is. If you talk of communication systems, you need to have slots which are allocated to you, and these slots are allocated to you depending on the frequency and the power and the height of footprint you provide from the ground, and how does the neighboring systems are compatible, because there is no interference coming out of this onto the other satellite or vice versa. So there is what is called the International Telecommunication Union and the World Administrative Radio Conference who look at these issues, who coordinate this, but these are all coordination mechanisms. There are no punitive mechanisms to deal with this. But then every country, in the interest of its own satellite working properly, will make sure that this is coordinated. Otherwise, they will suffer simply because there will be interferences from the other satellites. So there are slots in this. So far as the real operating system is concerned, this is the frequencies are coordinated, so that we will make sure that at particular altitudes, particular power and particular frequencies, there is least interference potential with similar systems that are operating in that orbit.
So, Dr. Anita, thanks so much. Now the questions are getting too technical. So we'll do that over lunch. I just want to present you, this is Amoghya Singh.